The heat in Texas didn't just sit on you, it weighed you down like a wet wool blanket, especially in late July. Inside Earl's roadside diner, the air conditioning was fighting a losing battle against the humidity and the heat radiating from the flat-top grill. For Leo, a 17-year-old with scuffed sneakers and an apron that was 2 sizes too big, the heat was just another thing to ignore. He had been on his feet for 6 hours straight, and the lunch rush was just starting to taper off into the drowsy lull of the afternoon. His back ached, a dull throb that pulsed in time with the neon sign buzzing in the window. Leo wasn't working for pocket money or to buy a new video game console like the other kids in his high school. Every dollar he made went into a coffee tin hidden under his mother's bed, saving up for her medication and the looming electric bill. His father had left 3 years ago, leaving behind nothing but debt and a rusted pickup truck that barely started. This job was Leo's lifeline, and he treated every shift like it was a matter of survival. He wiped down the laminate counter with mechanical precision, trying to tune out the sound of Earl, the owner, shouting orders from the kitchen window. The diner was located off a secondary highway, the kind of road that truckers used to avoid the way stations, and locals used to get nowhere fast. It was usually filled with regulars, farmers with sunburned necks, truck drivers looking for a caffeine fix, and weary travelers regretting their choice of route. The atmosphere was predictable, smelling of bacon grease, stale coffee, and lemon floor cleaner. Leo knew everyone's order before they sat down. He knew that Old Man Miller wanted his eggs runny, and that Mrs. Gable would complain if the iced tea wasn't sweet enough. Then the low rumble started. It wasn't the clatter of a diesel engine or the whine of a sedan. It was a deep, guttural vibration that shook the silverware on the tables. The sound grew louder, a thunderous roar that seemed to approach from all sides, drowning out the country music playing softly on the jukebox. The conversation in the diner died instantly. Forks froze mid-air and eyes darted toward the front windows. Through the dusty glass, a fleet of 6 heavy motorcycles turned into the gravel lot, their chrome gleaming violently under the harsh Texas sun. Leo felt a knot tighten in his stomach, a primal instinct that told him to make himself small. He had seen bikers pass through before, but these weren't weekend warriors on rented Harleys. These were serious machines, stripped down and loud, ridden by men who wore their leather cuts like armor. They parked in a perfect line, kickstands sinking into the hot gravel. The silence inside the diner was absolute, heavy with a mix of curiosity and genuine fear. In this part of Texas, motorcycle clubs were viewed with a suspicion that bordered on paranoia. The door chimed, a cheerful sound that felt absurdly out of place as the men walked in. Leading them was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He was massive, standing well over 6 feet, with a thick, graying beard and arms covered in tattoos that faded into the sleeves of his leather vest. A patch on his chest read, Sergeant-at-Arms. He took off his sunglasses, revealing eyes that scanned the room with the precision of a predator checking for threats. The other 5 men filed in behind him, dusty, sweaty, and imposing. Earl, usually the loudest man in the building, was suddenly very busy scrubbing a pot in the back. That left Leo. The boy swallowed hard, his throat dry. He smoothed his apron, trying to stop his hands from trembling. He knew he had to serve them. It was his job. If he walked out or hid, he'd lose the tips he desperately needed, or worse, he'd lose the job entirely. He grabbed a notepad and a pitcher of ice water, forcing his legs to move toward the large booth in the corner, where the group had settled. As he approached the table, the smell of gasoline, road dust, and leather hit him. It was an intense, masculine scent that overpowered the smell of frying onions. The men were laughing quietly among themselves, their voices gravelly and low. They didn't look up as Leo arrived. He stood there for a second, feeling invisible and terrified at the same time. The leader, the big man with the beard, was sitting right at the edge, his heavy boots extending into the aisle. Can I get you gentlemen started with some drinks?" Leo asked, his voice cracking slightly on the first word. He hated himself for sounding so weak. The leader stopped talking and slowly turned his head to look at Leo. For a second, the biker's face was unreadable, a stone mask weathered by thousands of miles of wind. Then he simply nodded. "Ice water all around, and coffee. Black. Keep it coming, kid." Leo nodded quickly, too quickly, and rushed back to the service station. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He fumbled with the glasses, filling them with ice, his hands shaking more noticeably now. "Don't mess this up," he told himself. Just get the water, get the order, get them out. He loaded the tray with 6 heavy glass tumblers, filled to the brim with water and soda for one of the younger bikers who had requested a cola. He navigated the diner floor, conscious of every eye on him. The other customers were watching the spectacle, glad it wasn't them serving the gang. Leo reached the table. He successfully placed the first 3 waters. He was doing fine. He moved to place the cola in front of the man next to the leader, but as he leaned in, his oversized apron snagged on the corner of the table. He felt the tug, but it was too late to correct his balance. The heavy tray tipped. Time seemed to slow down into an agonizing crawl. Leo watched helpless as the tall glass of dark, sticky soda slid off the plastic surface. It didn't hit the floor. It didn't hit the table. It crashed directly onto the lap and chest of the massive leader. The glass shattered against the man's heavy belt buckle. Ice cubes scattered across the floor. Dark brown liquid splashed up, soaking the pristine patches on the leather vest, drenching the man's jeans and pooling on the seat. The sound of the glass breaking was followed by a silence so profound it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Leo froze. His blood ran cold, and the color drained from his face. He stood there holding the empty tray, staring at the disaster he had just caused. The biker sat completely still, soda dripping from his beard and onto his hands. The other men at the table stopped moving. Every muscle in Leo's body locked up. He stopped breathing. In his mind, he saw his life flashing forward. The beating he was about to take, the firing, the hospital bills he couldn't afford. The leader slowly lifted his hands, looking at the sticky mess covering his chest. He took a deep, rattling breath that expanded his massive ribcage. The sound of a chair scraping against the floor echoed like a gunshot as the man began to stand up. He rose to his full height, towering over the terrified teenager. Leo squeezed his eyes shut, flinching, waiting for the blow that he was sure was coming. The silence in the diner stretched on for what felt like an eternity. To Leo, the only sound in the world was the rushing of blood in his own ears. He kept his eyes squeezed shut, his shoulders hunched, bracing for impact. He imagined the heavy hand of the biker crashing down on him, or perhaps being thrown across the room. He thought of his mother waiting at home, of the empty refrigerator, and how he had just ruined everything. "Open your eyes, son." The voice was deep, resonant, like stones grinding together, but it didn't carry the edge of rage Leo expected. It was calm, terrifyingly calm. Leo slowly opened his eyes. The giant biker was standing directly in front of him. Up close, the man looked even more formidable. A scar ran through his left eyebrow, and his arms were as thick as tree trunks, but he wasn't raising a fist. The biker reached out. Leo flinched again, stumbling back a step, but the man simply grabbed a stack of napkins from the dispenser on the table. He began to dab at his vest, wiping away the soda from the embroidered patches with surprising care. The sticky liquid dripped from his beard, but his expression remained impassive. The other bikers at the table were watching closely, their faces unreadable, waiting for their leader's cue. I'm so sorry," Leo stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean to. I tripped. I'll get a rag. I'll pay for the cleaning." He was rambling, panic making his words tumble over each other. He looked toward the kitchen window and saw Earl, his boss, clutching his head in his hands, his face red with a mix of anger and terror. Earl wasn't coming out to save him. Leo was completely alone. The biker stopped wiping his vest and looked down at Leo. He tossed the wet napkins onto the table, then slowly the corners of his mouth twitched. The terrifying stone mask cracked, and a genuine crooked smile appeared. "Breathe, kid," the man said. "You look like you're about to pass out. If you faint, then we really have a mess." Leo blinked, confused. "Sir? It's just soda," the biker said, his voice loud enough for the eavesdropping room to hear. He unbuttoned his leather vest and shrugged it off, shaking it out. "Leather is tough. It's been through rain, hail, and blood. A little sugar water ain't gonna kill it." He looked around the diner, making eye contact with the staring locals, until they quickly looked back at their plates. "Accidents happen, kid," the man continued, turning his attention back to Leo. He placed a heavy hand on Leo's shoulder. It wasn't a grip of aggression, it was a steadying weight. "It ain't about the mistake. Everyone makes 'em. It's how you fix 'em that counts. Now go get a mop before someone slips and sues the place." Leo felt a rush of oxygen return to his lungs. Yes, sir, right away." He scrambled to the back, grabbing the mop bucket with shaking hands. When he returned, the biker, whose name Leo heard one of the others say was Silas, was sitting in his t-shirt looking completely unbothered. Leo mopped the floor around their boots, working diligently. When he finished, he expected them to order him away or ask for a new waiter. Instead, Silas pointed to the empty coffee cup. "You still owe me that coffee, don't you?" he asked, a twinkle in his eye. Leo nodded fervently and rushed to get the pot. For the next hour, he served them with the focus of a surgeon. He refilled their drinks before they were empty. He brought their burgers out piping hot. The fear didn't completely vanish, but it transformed into a strange kind of awe. These men, whom the town whispered about as if they were monsters, were polite. They said thank you. They didn't harass the other customers. They ate, they laughed, and they treated Leo with more dignity than the church-going regulars who usually snapped their fingers at him. When they finished, Silas stood up and put his damp vest back on. He walked to the counter to pay the bill. Earl, the owner, was trembling as he rang up the total. Silas paid in cash, peeling bills from a thick roll. Then he turned back to the table where Leo was clearing the plates. Silas walked over to Leo. "You did good, kid. You kept your head." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a separate wad of cash. He pressed it into Leo's hand. "Buy yourself some shoes that fit. Maybe you won't trip next time." Leo looked down at his hand. It was a $100 bill, a single bill. That was more than he made in 3 shifts. He looked up, stunned. "Sir, I can't. This is too much. I spilled a drink on you." "Consider it a lesson fee," Silas grunted. "And a down payment on a new uniform." He patted Leo on the shoulder one last time, hard enough to rattle his teeth but gentle enough to be affectionate. "Keep your chin up." With that, Silas turned and marched out, his crew following in his wake. The door chimed again. The roar of the engines started up outside, vibrating through the floorboards, and then faded into the distance as they merged onto the highway. The diner remained silent for a long moment. Then the conversation slowly started up again, but the tone had changed. Leo stood there, clutching the $100 bill, feeling the sweat dry on his forehead. He realized he was crying, just a little, from the sheer release of tension. 2 weeks had passed since the incident at the diner. The story of the biker and the soda had circulated through the small town, growing more exaggerated with each retelling. In some versions, Leo had stood up to the biker. In others, the biker had threatened to burn the place down. Leo ignored the gossip. He kept the $100 bill in the tin under the bed, using it only when the pharmacy bill for his mother came in higher than expected. It had been a lifeline, but lifelines are temporary. The Texas summer grew crueler as August approached. The heat caused the asphalt to shimmer, and the air was thick with dust and pollen. Leo's life returned to its grueling routine. School in the morning, diner in the afternoon, homework late at night by a dim lamp. The brief moment of relief provided by Silas's tip had evaporated, replaced by the grinding reality of poverty. One Tuesday afternoon, Leo arrived at work to find Earl in a foul mood. The air conditioning unit had finally died, and the diner was a sauna. Customers were irritable, complaining about the heat and the flies. To make matters worse, Leo's mind wasn't on the job. His mother had received a notice from the landlord that morning. The rent was going up next month. It was an impossible sum. Leo was wiping down the counter when a group of local high school boys walked in. They were the varsity jacket crowd, sons of the local well-to-do families, loud, arrogant, and bored. They sat in the booth where Silas had sat weeks before. Leo knew them from school. They were the ones who made fun of his worn-out clothes and his lack of a car. "Hey, service!" one of them yelled, snapping his fingers. It was Brad, the quarterback, a kid who had never been told no in his life. Leo walked over, pad in hand, trying to keep his expression neutral. "What can I get you, Brad?" "I heard you're best friends with criminals now, Leo," Brad sneered, looking at his friends for validation. "Heard you like hanging out with trash." "Makes sense, considering where you live." The table erupted in laughter. Leo gripped his pen tight. "Just the order, Brad." "Get us 4 colas," Brad said, leaning back, "and try not to spill them on us. We aren't as nice as those bikers. My dad is the sheriff, remember?" The threat was thinly veiled. Leo retreated to the kitchen, his face burning with humiliation. He felt trapped. At school, he was invisible or a target. At work, he was a servant. Later that evening, as Leo was biking home, his pickup truck had finally died completely. The chain on his bicycle snapped. He was 3 miles from home, on a lonely stretch of county road with the sun setting and darkness creeping in from the fields. He threw the bike down in frustration, kicking the tire. He screamed into the empty air, a raw sound of exhaustion and anger. He sat on the side of the ditch, head in his hands. The pressure was becoming too much. The rent hike, the broken truck, the broken bike, the bullying. He felt like he was drowning. He remembered Silas's words. It's how you fix 'em that counts. But Leo didn't know how to fix this. He didn't have tools, he didn't have money, and he didn't have strength. As he sat there in the growing dark, headlights swept over him. He looked up, expecting a sheriff's car or maybe Brad coming to harass him. Instead, he saw a familiar silhouette. A heavy motorcycle slowed down, its engine rumbling low. The rider pulled onto the shoulder, kicking up dust. It wasn't Silas. It was one of the other men from the club, the younger one who had ordered the cola that day. He wore a patch that said Prospect on the front, though he looked older than Leo. He killed the engine and lifted his visor. "You're the kid from the diner," the biker said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Leo said, standing up defensively. "My chain broke." The biker looked at the bicycle, then at the dark road ahead. "Long walk to town." He didn't offer a ride immediately. He just sat there idling. "Silas liked you. Said you had guts for not running away." "I didn't have anywhere to run," Leo admitted, his voice sounding small in the open air. "That's usually when people fight the hardest," the biker said. He tapped his rear fender. "Hop on. I ain't leaving a kid out here in coyote country." Leo hesitated. Getting on a bike with a stranger was dangerous. Getting on a bike with a gang member was insane. But the alternative was a 2-hour walk in the dark. Leo climbed onto the back of the motorcycle. The machine felt powerful beneath him, vibrating with potential energy. As they rode toward town, the wind rushing past his face, Leo felt a strange sensation. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about the bills or the heat. He was just moving. Fast. The biker dropped him off a block from his house. "Name's Rian," the biker said before pulling away. "Keep your head up, kid." Leo walked the last block home, his heart racing. He wasn't scared anymore. He was intrigued. He realized that the only people who had treated him with genuine respect lately were the ones the town called outlaws. A dangerous idea began to form in his mind. If he couldn't fix his problems the right way, maybe he needed help from people who lived by different rules. The idea simmered in Leo's mind for days. The breaking point came on a Friday. Leo came home to find his mother sitting at the kitchen table, sobbing quietly. The landlord had stopped by personally. If they didn't come up with the extra deposit money by the 1st of the month, 5 days away, they would be evicted. The trailer park they lived in was being bought out, and the new owners wanted to clear out the low-income tenants. Leo did the math. Even with every shift Earl gave him, even if he didn't eat lunch for a week, he would be short by $300. It wasn't a fortune to some, but to them it was an insurmountable wall. He felt a crack form in his chest. The system was broken. Playing by the rules, working hard, being polite, it wasn't working. He needed money, and he needed it fast. He thought of the garage he had seen the bikers frequent on the edge of town. It was a place called Iron Horse Customs. Locals avoided it. It was rumored to be the clubhouse for the MC. Leo put on his cleanest jeans, washed his face, and walked out the door. He told his mom he was picking up an extra shift. The walk to the edge of town was long and hot. The garage sat behind a high chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Rows of motorcycles were parked outside. Loud classic rock music blared from the open bay doors. Leo stood at the gate, his hands sweating. He didn't have a plan. He just had desperation. He pushed the buzzer on the gate. A camera swiveled to look at him. A voice crackled over the intercom. "We're closed, get lost." I'm looking for Silas," Leo shouted into the box. "Tell him it's the kid from the diner, the one who spilled the drink." There was a long pause. Then the electric lock buzzed, and the gate slid open a few feet. Leo slipped through, feeling like he was crossing a border into a different country. He walked toward the open bay doors. Inside, the garage was a cavern of metal, oil, and smoke. Men were working on bikes, welding, and drinking beer. Silas was there, leaning over a stripped-down engine block, a rag in his hand. He looked up as Leo approached. The big man didn't smile this time. His face was hard, professional. He wiped his greasy hands on the rag. "You're a long way from the burger joint, kid," Silas said, his voice echoing in the large space. "What are you doing here?" "I need a job," Leo said, his voice steady despite his fear. "I need money. Fast. I'll do anything. I can clean, I can sweep, I can wash the bikes." Silas narrowed his eyes. The other men in the shop had stopped working to listen. The atmosphere was tense. This wasn't a charity, it was a club. "We ain't a temp agency, boy. And we don't hire civilians. I'm not asking for a handout," Leo insisted, taking a step forward. "You said accidents happen, but it's how you fix them that counts. My life it's an accident right now. It's a mess, and I need to fix it. I'm willing to work harder than anyone you got." Silas studied the boy. He saw the desperation in Leo's eyes, the fraying collar of his shirt, the clenched fists. He saw a reflection of himself from 30 years ago. He sighed, tossing the rag onto a workbench. "You think this is cool? You think this is like the movies?" Silas gestured around the shop. "This is grease, busted knuckles and heat. It ain't glamorous." "I don't care about cool," Leo said. "I care about rent." Silas paused. The mention of rent struck a chord. He looked at Ryan, the prospect who had given Leo a ride. Ryan shrugged. Silas turned back to Leo. "I can't give you a job in the club. That ain't how it works." "But," he pointed to a pile of rusted scrap metal and old parts in the corner of the yard. "I got a heap of scrap that needs sorting and loading for the recycling yard. It's brutal work. Sharp edges, heavy iron, snakes in the grass." "I'll do it," Leo said instantly. "I'll pay you cash at the end of the day, $10 an hour," Silas said. "But if you complain once, if you stop before the job is done, you get nothing, and you never come back here. Understand?" "Understood," Leo said. He walked straight to the pile without waiting for another word. He grabbed a pair of heavy gloves lying on a barrel and started pulling at a rusted fender. Silas watched him for a moment, a look of grim respect on his face. He turned back to his engine. "Don't let him die of heat stroke, Ryan," he muttered. Leo worked like a man possessed, driven by the fear of eviction and the need to prove he wasn't just a clumsy waiter. The break had happened. He had stepped out of his world and into theirs. The work was agonizing. The Texas sun beat down on the scrapyard, turning the metal into branding irons. Within 20 minutes, Leo was soaked in sweat. Within an hour, his hands were blistered even through the gloves. He cut his shin on a jagged piece of exhaust pipe, but he didn't stop. He hauled engine blocks, sorted rusted frames, and piled aluminum siding. By late afternoon, Leo was physically destroyed. His muscles trembled with every movement. He was dizzy from dehydration, though he drank from the garden hose whenever Ryan pointed it out to him. He was at the bottom of his physical limits. As the sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the yard, the mental toll began to set in. He watched the club members from the corner of his eye. They laughed, drank beer, and joked with a camaraderie that Leo had never known. He felt like an outsider looking in at a family he could never join. He was just the hired help, the desperate kid digging through trash. Doubts crept in. Was this worth it? Is this who I am now? A scavenger? Around sunset, disaster struck again. Leo was carrying a heavy transmission casing toward the truck. His legs, shaking from exhaustion, gave out. He stumbled. The heavy metal part crashed down, not on his foot, but onto a pristine, custom-painted gas tank that was sitting on a low table nearby, waiting to be installed on a client's bike. The sound of metal crunching against metal was sickening. The beautiful, glossy black paint chipped, and a deep dent appeared in the side of the tank. Leo fell to his knees, gasping for breath, staring at the damage. He had done it again. He had destroyed something valuable. Music stopped. The shop went silent. Silas walked over, his boots crunching on the gravel. He looked at the dented tank. It was a custom job, worth hundreds, maybe $1,000. He looked down at Leo, who was kneeling in the dirt, covered in rust and grime, tears of frustration streaking his dirty face. "Get up," Silas said. His voice was hard. Leo struggled to his feet. I'll pay for it. Take it out of my pay." "Your pay wouldn't cover the paint," Silas snapped. "That's a client's bike. That's my reputation." Leo felt the crush of failure. He had come here to save his family, and instead, he had dug a deeper hole. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I'm so tired." Silas looked at the boy. He saw the bleeding shin, the blisters, the shaking hands. He saw a kid who had worked for 6 hours straight without a break in 100-degree heat. The anger in Silas's eyes faded, replaced by a weary wisdom. He kicked a plastic crate over. "Sit down." Leo sat, head hanging low. Silas grabbed a cold bottle of water from a cooler and pressed it against Leo's neck. The cold shock made Leo jump. "Drink." Leo drank greedily. Silas leaned against a workbench. "You pushed yourself until you broke, kid. That ain't strength, that's stupidity. A machine runs until it overheats and then it seizes up. You seized up." "I needed the money," Leo said, his voice cracking. "My mom. We're going to lose the trailer." Silas was silent for a long time. The crickets were starting to chirp in the tall grass. "You think carrying scrap makes you a man?" Silas asked quietly. "Being a man isn't about how much pain you can take. It's about knowing your limits and knowing when to ask for the right kind of help. You came here asking for work, which is good, but you didn't tell us the stakes. You carried that weight alone." Silas reached into his pocket. He pulled out the cash Leo had earned, $60. Then he added 3 more $100 bills to it. He shoved the money into Leo's shirt pocket. "I can't take this," Leo said, touching the pocket. "I broke the tank." "The tank is insured," Silas lied. Or maybe he didn't, Leo couldn't tell. "The money isn't a gift, it's a loan, but not a money loan. You owe me a favor to be named later. And you owe me a promise." "What promise?" "That you stop letting the world walk all over you. You stop acting like a victim. You stood up to come here, that took guts. Now keep standing up, but do it smart." Silas pointed to the gate. "Go home to your mother, fix your rent, then come back here on Saturday, not to haul scrap, to learn how to sand and prep paint. You're going to fix that tank you dented. With your own hands." Leo looked at Silas, realizing that this was the fixing it part. He wasn't being fired, he was being taught. He nodded, wiping the dirt from his face. "Yes, sir." The rent was paid. The crisis was averted for another month. But Leo was different now. Saturday mornings were spent at Iron Horse Customs. Silas taught him how to sand metal, how to use body filler, how to prime a surface. It was tedious, detailed work, vastly different from the brute force of the scrapyard. Leo learned patience. He learned that rushing caused mistakes, and mistakes cost time. He also learned about the men. They weren't monsters. They were veterans, mechanics, fathers, and yes, some had rough pasts, but they lived by a code of loyalty that the rest of the town lacked. Leo absorbed their confidence by osmosis. He stood straighter. He looked people in the eye. The confrontation came, as it always does, when least expected. It was a Friday night at the diner. The high school football team had won a game, and the place was packed. Brad and his crew were there, drunk on victory and adrenaline. They were making a mess, throwing napkins, harassing the waitresses. Earl was hiding in the kitchen, too afraid of the sheriff's son to intervene. Leo was buzzing a table near them. Brad reached out and grabbed Leo's apron, yanking him backward. Leo stumbled but caught his balance, a reflex honed by dodging tools in the shop. "Hey, grease monkey," Brad slurred. "I heard you're washing bikes for the trash now. You think you're tough?" The diner went quiet. People watched. The old Leo would have apologized, looked down and walked away. But the Leo standing there smelled like Bondo and primer. He remembered Silas's words. "Stop acting like a victim." Leo slowly removed Brad's hand from his apron. He didn't use violence. He didn't shout. He used the stillness he had learned from Silas. He looked Brad directly in the eyes, his face calm, almost bored. "I'm working, Brad," Leo said clearly. "Let go." "Or what?" Brad stood up, puffing out his chest. "You going to call your biker daddies?" "No," Leo said. "I'm going to ask you to sit down and finish your meal with some respect for the people serving you. Because if you make a mess, you're the one who looks like a child, not me." Brad blinked. He expected fear. He expected a fight. He didn't know how to handle calm assertiveness. The other customers were watching. The silence wasn't fearful this time. It was judgmental, against Brad. "You think you're funny?" Brad raised a fist, his ego bruised. Leo didn't flinch. He didn't put up his hands, he just held Brad's gaze. "I'm not being funny. I'm asking you to act like a man. Accidents happen, Brad. People get drunk, they act stupid. It's how you fix it that counts. Sit down." The line, Silas's line, hit its mark. It disarmed the situation by offering Brad a way out without losing face entirely. It was a psychological move, not a physical one. Brad hesitated. The tension hung in the air. Finally, Brad's friends pulled him back down. "Leave it, man, he's just a waiter." Brad sat down, muttering. Leo turned his back on them, the ultimate sign of confidence, and walked to the kitchen. His hands were shaking slightly, but his heart was steady. He had won without throwing a punch. He had fixed the situation. From a booth in the back corner, unnoticed by the loud crowd, a figure in a leather vest tipped his coffee cup toward Leo. It was Silas. He had been there the whole time, watching. He didn't intervene because he didn't have to. The boy had handled it. Summer faded into autumn. The oppressive Texas heat finally broke, replaced by crisp, cool evenings. The trees along the highway turned shades of rust and gold. Life in the town went on, but the dynamic had shifted. Leo was no longer just the poor kid with the single mom. He was the guy who worked at Iron Horse Customs on weekends. He had fixed the dented tank. It took him 3 weeks of sanding and polishing until his fingers were raw, but he made it look like black glass. When the customer picked it up, they never knew it had been damaged. That victory meant more to Leo than any grade on a report card. One evening, Leo was closing up the diner. It was late and the closed sign was already flipped. A motorcycle pulled up to the window. Silas tapped on the glass. Leo smiled and unlocked the door. Silas walked in, not as a customer but as a friend. He sat at the counter. "Coffee?" Leo asked. "Nah, just stopped by to give you this." Silas slid an envelope across the counter. Leo opened it. It was a receipt for the rent on his mother's trailer, paid up for the next 6 months. Leo stared at it, his mouth falling open. "Silas, I haven't worked enough hours to cover this." "Consider it a bonus," Silas said, leaning back. "And it ain't from me. The boys chipped in. We had a good month at the shop. Plus, having a kid around who doesn't complain is worth something." Leo looked at the big biker, struggling to find the words. "Why? Why did you help me? That first day, you could have just yelled at me." Silas looked at his reflection in the napkin dispenser. "Because I was you, Leo, 30 years ago. I spilled a drink on the wrong guy. He beat me half to death. It sent me down a dark road. I spent years angry, trying to get even with the world." He looked at Leo. "When you spilled that drink, I saw a choice. I could be the guy who made you hard, or the guy who helped you stand up. I chose to break the cycle." Leo nodded, understanding the weight of the confession. "I learned a lot from you, Silas. More than just sanding paint." "Good." Silas stood up, zipping his vest. "Because you're done at the shop." Leo panicked. "What? Did I mess up?" "No," Silas smiled, that same crooked smile from the first day. "You're done because you need to focus on school. You're smart, Leo. You got a future that ain't in a grease pit. You use that money, you finish school, and you get out of this town. Go be an engineer or something. Design better bikes, don't just fix old ones. But, no buts. You're always welcome to visit, but you ain't a prospect. You're a civilian with potential. Don't waste it." Silas extended his hand. Leo shook it. The grip was firm, equal. Silas walked to the door. "Oh, and Leo." "Yeah? Next time you serve a soda, use 2 hands." Silas walked out into the cool night air. Leo watched him mount his bike and roar off onto the empty highway, the red taillight fading into the dark. Leo turned back to the empty diner. He folded the receipt and put it in his pocket. He picked up his mop. The floor needed cleaning. But as he worked, he wasn't looking down at his feet anymore. He was looking out the window at the road ahead, knowing exactly how to handle whatever bumps were coming next. He knew that kindness wasn't weakness, and that the strongest hearts often beat beneath the toughest leather.